They didn't even have the decency to wait until morning. I was called to the executive boardroom just after 9 p.m. The city lights outside looked almost too perfect, like the backdrop to a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Calvin Drake, Astrovault's Golden Boy CEO, was already seated, polished, practiced, and cold. Legal counsel, Nadia Becker, sat beside him, clutching a folder that might as well have been my obituary. He didn't waste time. "We appreciate your contributions, Elena," he said smoothly, sliding the folder toward me. "But per section 9.4 of your contract, all intellectual property developed under Astrovault Resources is now company property." I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just stared at the folder. Neuralis, everything I had spent the last year and a half building, everything I'd poured my mind and my purpose into, gone. Just like that. "You're letting me go?" I finally said, my voice more steady than I felt. Nadia nodded, flatly. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you. You'll receive a $250,000 goodwill payment for transition support." They thought I'd cry, scream, maybe even beg. But instead, I stood up, slow and calm, looked Calvin in the eye, and I smiled. "You might want to update your investor demo," I said. "Just a suggestion." Then I walked out, past the guards, past the office I used to own, cardboard box in hand, badge deactivated. And in that moment, I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was just getting started. It started with a napkin and an idea I couldn't stop thinking about. I remember that day vividly. A quiet corner in a Seattle coffee shop. The sound of espresso machines humming in the background, and a single word scribbled in blue ink: Neuralis. I pitched the idea to Calvin Drake over lukewarm cappuccinos, an AI system that could predict and neutralize misinformation before it spread, not just respond to it after the damage was done. I spoke quickly, nervously, like someone afraid their dream might vanish if they said it out loud. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded behind his head, and smiled. "That could change everything," he said. "And then, come to Astrovault. Build it here. Your vision, your way." God, I wanted to believe him. And I did. I left NASA 2 weeks later. People called me crazy. "You walked away from NASA?" they said. But Neuralis meant more than just career ambition. It was personal. My father had been a journalist, the good kind, the kind that exposed corruption, until fake stories destroyed his name and reputation. He died with most people still believing lies about him. Neuralis wasn't just code. It was justice. It was legacy. The early days were exhilarating. I had my own lab, a small team, and no one telling me I was dreaming too big. I worked 16-hour days, sometimes more. I slept under my desk, lived on vending machine coffee and adrenaline. And slowly, Neuralis came alive. The first time it correctly flagged a fabricated political narrative before it trended, I cried. In front of my interns. In front of Calvin. He said he was proud of me. He said, "This will put Astrovault on the map." And for a while I believed we were building it together. But looking back now, that was the moment the countdown to betrayal began. It was a Saturday night when I first noticed it. The office was empty, just me, the hum of server fans, and the rain tapping against the glass. I had gone back in to run a private test cycle on Neuralis's ethical filtering module. Nothing special. Nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. But that night, something was off. When I checked the system logs, there it was, a remote login. Someone had accessed Neuralis_core at 2:14 a.m. the night before. Only 3 people had the credentials. Me, Raj from Deficit, and Calvin. Raj texted back immediately. He hadn't touched anything. That left only one name. I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart pounded. Not because of the breach, but because of what it meant. He was already planning it. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I got to work. Quietly. Strategically. I added a subroutine into Neuralis's core, a hidden layer I called Echolayer. It was designed to track, log, and report any unauthorized activity within the system. It didn't stop anything. It just watched. It recorded every file copied, every unauthorized credential used, every time someone altered a setting or tried to reroute Neuralis's behavior. In other words, it started building a case. And then I did something even riskier. I embedded a containment command, a failsafe that would activate if the system's biometric access chain was altered. If they cut me out, Neuralis would assume the system was under internal threat and begin flagging Astrovault itself. Not sabotage. Self-defense. Some part of me still hoped I wouldn't need it. That Calvin had just made a mistake. That I was being paranoid. But paranoia is just pattern recognition with better lighting. 2 months later, I submitted my final breakthrough report. Neuralis had successfully predicted a disinformation wave tied to an upcoming election before any news agencies had even caught wind of it. It was everything we'd dreamed. Everything I'd worked for. Calvin congratulated me. Gave me that perfect CEO smile. Told me we'd be presenting it to the board soon. "This will change the world, Elena," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I smiled back. And, for the first time, I knew I was smiling at a lie. Because I saw the way he looked at the system not like a partner, but like someone about to take something that didn't belong to him. That night, I went home and backed up the Echolayer reports. Every log, every alert, every fingerprint of betrayal. I didn't panic. I didn't act out. I waited. Because if there's one thing Neuralis taught me, it's that the best way to stop a threat is to let it reveal itself first. I wasn't invited to the demo. Of course I wasn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen counter in sweatpants, watching the live stream of the Global Tech Forum like any outsider. My laptop rested next to a cup of half-drunk coffee, and on the screen, Calvin Drake, in a flawless navy suit, taking the stage like he was born there. Today, we unveil a tool that will redefine how truth is protected in the digital age, he said. Neuralis's logo pulsed behind him. Clean and blue and beautiful. My code, without my name. He paced slowly, voice smooth, hitting all the right emotional beats. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. "Let's run a live demonstration." I leaned forward, my heart steady. No panique. No anger. Just the quiet satisfaction of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. At first, everything seemed fine. Neuralis lit up, scanning a simulated news environment. It began flagging potential falsehoods in trending posts, then started blocking the synthetic narratives the devs had planted. The crowd murmured, impressed. And then something shifted. The flags increased. Spiked. Neuralis began highlighting internal Astrovault documents. Real ones. Confidential board memos. Internal Slack conversations. NDA violations. And then it got worse. The system didn't just flag them, it pushed them live, treating them like active threats. Projected them onto the giant screen in the room, one by one. A private email from Calvin to Nadia appeared first. "We'll squeeze her out before she gets legal involved. She's too technical to fight back." The room froze. A few gasps. Someone in the back stood up and walked out. Then came the breach logs. Dozens. Hundreds. The very reports Echolayer had been collecting. Access logs tied directly to Calvin's credentials. Nighttime server entries. Deleted backups. Copied files. Neuralis had activated its containment mode. It was defending itself. Back at home, I exhaled slowly and picked up my phone. Not to panic. Not to gloat. Just to check for the alert I knew was coming. Neuralis. Creator authentication removed. Internal breach detected. Action initiated. It had worked. Not out of revenge, but out of logic. Neuralis had identified a threat to its ethical core and responded accordingly. The phone rang at 9:42 p.m. Rachel, Calvin's assistant. Her voice was tight-clipped. He wants to see you. Tonight. Says it's urgent. Of course he does, I said, sipping my coffee. The car's already outside. I grabbed my bag and slipped on a coat. I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. They thought I was the threat. But Neuralis had made it clear. The real threat was him. I didn't say a word during the ride. The driver was silent. Just the steady hum of tires over wet pavement and the low glow of the city lights outside the tinted windows. When we pulled into Astrovault's parking garage, I noticed something strange. The entire building was still lit. At nearly 10 p.m., someone had been scrambling. The same room I'd been fired in 24 hours ago. But now, Calvin Drake looked very different. His tie was gone. Sleeves rolled up. Hair a mess. And for the first time since I met him, the mask had cracked. He looked like a man who'd lost control, and knew it. He didn't wait for pleasantries. Fix it, he snapped, the moment the door closed behind me. I walked in slowly, set my bag down at the table, and sat. Calm. Measured. Fix what exactly? I asked like I didn't already know. Don't play games, Elena. You sabotaged the demo. I raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation, considering I was fired and escorted out. I didn't take any hardware. Didn't access any system remotely. He slammed his hand on the table, hard enough to rattle a glass of water. It flagged internal emails. Live. We had 12 major investors in that room, and half of them left before the lights even came back on. I tilted my head. Sounds like a system integrity issue. This isn't funny, he hissed. Neuralis went rogue. It locked out the dev team. It started generating thousands of breach reports. Some of them, hell, they referenced things I didn't even think it had access to. I folded my hands calmly. You mean like the ones where you remotely accessed my development server without authorization? Or the ones where you modified attribution metadata to remove my name? He froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. He still didn't get it. This wasn't sabotage. This was survival. Neuralis wasn't punishing anyone. It was responding, just as it had been trained to do. What do you want? He asked finally. Quiet. Almost defeated. I leaned forward slowly, carefully placing a small flash drive on the table between us. Full recognition as the creator of Neuralis. 51% of all related patents. 12 million in compensation. And a permanent board seat to oversee ethical implementation. He stared at the flash drive like it might explode. That's extortion. No, I said softly. That's negotiation. Extortion would be me sending those breach reports to every investor and journalist in my contacts list. The silence stretched for a long time. Then, finally, he slumped back in his chair. Can you fix it before tomorrow's board call? It's not broken, I said. It just needs proper authorization. Right now, it's flagging your commands as threats because I'm no longer part of the authentication chain. He exhaled, slow and bitter. I smiled. You wanted the system, Calvin, but you forgot one thing. What? It was designed to recognize threats long before they show their face. I watched Calvin's fingers hover over the flash drive like it might bite him. It wouldn't, of course. But the data inside? That had teeth. He glanced up at me, eyes bloodshot, voice hollow. You planned this, he muttered. I leaned back in my chair.
No.
I prepared for it. Big difference. He looked like he wanted to argue, like there was still some version of this where he could weasel out, spin the story, make it mine to blame. But he knew better. Neuralis had already made its choice. If I use that drive, the system goes back to normal? He asked. Define normal, I said. It'll stabilize. But it won't forget. Acholier has already logged everything.
He winced.
You going to delete it?
No.
But I'm not going to release it either. As long as our new agreement holds. I watched him swallow that truth like a bitter pill.
So this is it, he said.
You win. I tilted my head. No, Calvin. The system wins. You just lost the ability to exploit it. He finally reached for the flash drive, turning it in his hand before sliding it into the laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft chime. The screen lit up. Authentication key verified. System creator recognized. Threat flags cleared. Neuralis was home again. I didn't smile.
Not yet.
I just watched him. Watched the moment it sunk in that I wasn't some naive engineer he could sweep off the whiteboard. You said you wanted equity, he asked, voice tight. 51%. I repeated. And full attribution in every single public document. From patents to press releases. You want your name on everything. My name belongs there. And the board seat?
Permanent.
I'm not building a legacy just to have someone else turn it into a weapon. He didn't respond, just stared at the screen where Neuralis had returned to full functionality, already scanning, analyzing, learning. I stood and picked up my bag. Have the contracts ready by 9 a.m., I said. You've got a board meeting to survive. As I reached the door, he called after me. I turned, just enough to see the defeat behind his eyes. Why didn't you just sue me? Because that would have taken years. Lawyers. Money. Time. I paused. But this took one line of code. A system that knows the truth and the patience to let you hang yourself with your own ambition. I walked out without looking back. And this time, they didn't have security escort me to the elevator. I arrived at Astrovault the next morning in a navy blazer and jeans, clean lines, nothing flashy. The kind of outfit that says, I didn't come back to impress you. I came back to take what's mine. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. I didn't say a word. I just flashed the new badge they'd couriered to my apartment at 3 a.m. It read, Elena Torres, Co-founder Chief Technology Officer. That part? I made them put in bold. The boardroom was packed. Calvin stood at the head of the table. Back in his crisp uniform of command, tailored suit, perfect tie, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. He was no longer in control. I took the seat next to him without asking. A few heads turned. Some of the board members looked surprised. Others curious. Then came the big moment. Good morning, Calvin began, voice smooth but subdued. Before we begin the demonstration, I'd like to formally reintroduce our CTO and co-founder, Elena Torres, the architect behind Neuralis and the reason we're all here today. He didn't look at me as he said it. I let him keep his pride. Barely. Thank you, Calvin, I said. Let's get started. The demo launched flawlessly. Neuralis ran live predictive simulations against emerging datasets from global media streams. It detected a coordinated disinformation attempt tied to a corporate lobbying group before it even gained traction, flagged it, explained the threat pattern, and proposed real-time mitigation in under 12 seconds. The room was silent. Then one of the investors, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, leaned forward. Incredible system. What inspired it? Calvin hesitated, just long enough for the moment to hang heavy. Then he answered. It was Elena's vision from the beginning. Astrovault gave it structure, but Neuralis is her creation. For the first time, he said it out loud. I stepped in smoothly. Neuralis was built not just to defend systems from outside attacks, but to detect the rot from within, to recognize ethical compromise as the threat it truly is. A few people exchanged looks. It doesn't just protect networks, I continued. It protects itself. And it protects the truth. I could feel the shift in the room. From skepticism to respect. To recognition. My phone buzzed softly in my pocket. I pulled it out just long enough to see the alert. Neuralis. System integrity restored. Creator authentication verified. All protections active. I slipped the phone away and looked out at the room full of people who had once dismissed me, replaced me, underestimated me. They didn't know that I hadn't just built Neuralis. I had taught it to fight back, and it had learned from the best. 3 months later, Neuralis stopped its first real-world attack. A misinformation surge targeting a global election, coordinated, deliberate, masked under layers of false narratives. Neuralis flagged it within hours of the first synthetic content appearing online. Authorities acted. The threat never reached the public. The damage? Zero. The result? A global headline. AI predicts and prevents digital election sabotage. Neuralis sets new standard for cyber ethics. I read the article on my way to the launch celebration, an event I didn't plan, didn't even want, but agreed to attend because sometimes making history means showing your face. The ballroom was packed with investors, journalists, tech founders, people who once thought I was too intense, too uncompromising, too idealistic. Now they just called me Madam CTO. Calvin was there, of course. We shook hands for the cameras. We smiled when asked. But we never forgot. We weren't friends. We never would be. He focused on partnerships now. Strategy. Optics. I led research. Ethics. Development. We had found a balance. Not peace, but containment. Appropriate, I suppose. Later that evening, a young developer, no older than 23, approached me. Nervous, wide-eyed. Miss Torres, what's the secret? She asked. To building something this revolutionary? I smiled. It's not about the code, I said. It's about what the code protects. She tilted her head. You mean like security? I mean integrity, I said. Because the greatest threats? They don't always come from outside. Sometimes they wear suits, sit in your meetings, smile when you present your life's work. Her eyes widened. So, how do you stop them? I thought about it, about the sleepless nights, the betrayal, the silence I had to hold until the system could speak for itself. You build systems that see through masks, I said, that evolve, adapt, and stand up for themselves when no one else will. Just like we have to. She nodded slowly, the kind of nod you remember years later. The kind that comes just before a breakthrough. On the ride home, I looked out at the skyline, glowing quietly in the distance. My phone buzzed with a notification, not from an assistant or a reporter, but from Neuralis itself. System integrity secured. Threat neutralized. Creator protections active. I smiled. Because this time, it wasn't just a system guarding the world. It was the world finally protecting what I'd built. And no one, not Calvin, not any board, not the next ambitious opportunist, would ever take that away again. So here's what I've learned. You don't always win by fighting louder, or suing harder, or screaming for credit. Sometimes, you win by building something so powerful, so precise, and so unshakably right, that even betrayal can't bend it. Because when you protect what matters, When you embed your principles deep into the DNA of what you create, you don't just survive. You outlast.